On March 3, 1969, the world's first automatic chronograph movement, referred to as Chronomatic or Caliber 11, was announced at a press conference in New York City. Now, Caliber 11 was a joint venture among many brands, Hamilton being one of them, to produce the world's first automatic chronograph. It resulted in a distinctly designed caliber that positioned the crown at 9 o'clock and the pushers on the right side of the case. 2 years later, in 1971, that groundbreaking movement made its way into a Hamilton watch named the Pan-Europ. The watch featured a blue dial inside of a brushed cushion case. Now, 50 years later, Hamilton re-released a limited edition version of the Pan-Europ, gorgeous blue dial and all, housing its caliber H31. Suitably limited to 1,971 pieces, it was a smash success. Now, riding on that wave, Hamilton more broadly released black and silver dial versions of this chronograph in 2012. Now, there's a lot that's right with this Pan-Europ, both as a modern watch and as a throwback to the brand's heritage, but it's really as a contemporary, sensibly designed, and accessibly priced chronograph that today's Pan-Europ really succeeds. Measuring 45 millimeters wide, 15 millimeters thick, and 48.5 millimeters lug to lug, today's Pan-Europ is larger than its original inspiration, although Hamilton's case design primarily remains faithful to the watch released in 1971. However, one feature is missing, and it's likely the single most striking characteristic of the world's first automatic chronograph: the 9 o'clock crown. Owing to the ETA-produced caliber inside the reissue, the new Pan-Europ instead possesses the typical right side crown and pushers configuration. The crown screws down, contributing to its 100 meters water resistance. Despite intimidating tool-like measurements, the Pan-Europ has moments of elegance, particularly in its case finishing and dial design. While defined brushing adorns the top and sides of the case, polished beveling accentuates the curves of the barrel shape. At 10 o'clock on the left side of the case is a recessed pusher for adjusting the date, which is a recent evil in ETA's later chronograph calibers. The dial is a laudable effort thanks to its balance and contrast. While a lot of reissues tend to improve on the classics by inserting a date aperture, the 1971 original actually had one. So, just like its inspiration, the date window on today's Pan-Europ is placed at 6 o'clock, maintaining the symmetry that makes this dial, and its original, so legible and attractive. The contrast is bold and obvious, but if you look closely you can see some cool detail. The red chronograph and subdial hands add a splash of color and sense of speed. I particularly love how the running seconds and 30-minute registers have very three-dimensional scales angled inward that appear to bulge ever so slightly into the outer chapter ring. The Pan-Europ features a sapphire crystal exhibition caseback through which you can see Hamilton's caliber H31 in action. Caliber H31 is a modified Valjoux 7753, a proven movement used by many brands in the watch industry. Specifically, this watch features a bigger barrel lending to its 60-hour power reserve versus the standard 44, and interesting decoration from Hamilton. I say interesting because it's quite utilitarian and basically finished, but it's still well done and appears intentionally minimal, not lazy. My only gripe is the date adjustment. I don't like the idea of having to use foreign objects to adjust the date, which is often necessary if you rotate regularly throughout a collection of watches, since any one watch will wind down. It's not only inconvenient to not be able to use the crown for this, but the recessed pusher mars an otherwise clean and smooth case side. I was certain that 45mm was going to dominate my 6 3/4 inch wrist, but I was pleasantly surprised with the Pan-Europ's wearability. While the Pan-Europ has a confident wrist presence, it's comfortable without being oversized thanks to its relatively modest lug-to-lug distance. It weighs 129 grams, which is a nice heft for most wrists without being overbearing. Through and through, it's a sport watch with a few luxurious touches, making it a versatile and ideal choice for everyday wear. When the Pan-Europ reissue hit the market in 2011, one of the biggest complaints was the strap. Collectors felt Hamilton shouldn't have equipped the watch with such a glossy alligator grain strap, and omitting a deployant seemed like a cheap move for the watch, both oversights being especially egregious for a limited edition piece, to which a lot of collectors typically are less price sensitive. This generally available model strap isn't different from the limited releases other than its color, and while I wish it were of finer quality, I'm quite impressed for what it is. Most grain straps are cardboard stiff, but this one conformed to the wrist fairly quickly, and although Hamilton makes excellent deployants, I'm okay with the pin buckles because they make those well too. Today's Pan-Europ automatic chronograph is competitively priced at $1,945, completing the package and making this one of my top considerations for an entry-level sports chronograph. Brands sold exclusively online, like Zinn, come to mind as worthy alternatives that also offer proven ETA movements, solid cases, and historic designs at honest prices. A watch like the Zinn 103, with its beautifully proud and domed acrylic crystal, probably holds the edge for looking and feeling more like a vintage chronograph, while the Pan-Europ is certainly vintage-inspired, but with modern, luxurious details and conveniences. Hamilton had every intention of releasing this as an homage to the original Pan-Europ, but for few reasons, this remake rather commands respect as a modern chronograph. There is no question that this watch, even if we're talking about the black or silver versions, especially, very closely resembles the 1971 model. However, it's bigger, it's a different color, contains a much less historic movement, and has an updated dial. It's quite different from the original, but the updates made to the Pan-Europ are less like unscripted improvements we typically see in reissues, and more like a collection of iterations that tastefully form a new watch with undeniable 1971 DNA.